The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. They were made up of 17 ancient species, each one older than human civilization itself. They kept order in the galaxy through a simple system that had never failed: tribute. Every younger species paid what the Council demanded. Some paid in minerals and rare metals. Some paid in technology. Some paid in people, sending their brightest minds to serve the elder races. No one had ever said no. No one had ever even thought about saying no. When human ships first broke the light-speed barrier in the year 2847, the Council took notice. Earth was a small world on the edge of explored space, home to a species that had only recently stopped fighting among themselves. The Council had seen hundreds of young species rise to the stars. They all followed the same pattern. They discovered faster than light travel. They celebrated their achievement. And then the Council arrived to explain how things really worked. Ambassador, Kethforin, of the Silvari, was chosen for the mission. The Silvari were among the oldest of the Council races, known for their cold logic and complete lack of mercy. Kethforin had delivered tribute demands to 37 species during his career. All 37 had expected nothing different from humanity. His diplomatic vessel was enormous, nearly the size of a small city. He parked it in orbit above Earth, making sure it was visible from the ground. The shadow of his ship fell across Europe for hours each day. It was a reminder, a message written in darkness. This is how small you are. Admiral Patricia Hayes led the human delegation. She was 62 years old, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen 3 wars. She had spent her life defending Earth from other humans. Now she would face something far more dangerous. Beside her stood Secretary General Marcus Webb, the leader of the United Earth government, and Dr. Linda Morrison, the Chief Science Officer of the Global Defense Initiative. They met the alien ambassador in Unity Hall, a building constructed specifically for this moment. For decades, humanity had prepared for first contact. They had built this place hoping to welcome friends from the stars. Instead, they were meeting a collector of debts. Kethforin was terrifying to look at. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, covered in scales that shifted colors as he moved. 4 eyes sat in a diamond pattern on his face, each one moving independently. When he spoke, his voice came from a device in his throat. Translating his words into perfect English, he did not bother with greetings or pleasantries. Humanity will provide 30% of your annual mineral output, he announced. You will send 10,000 of your most intelligent individuals to serve in council institutions each year. You will give us complete access to your genetic database. This is the standard tribute for species at your level of development. You have 1 rotation of your planet to accept these terms. Patricia kept her face calm. Inside, her heart was pounding. And if we choose to decline, Kethforin's 4 eyes blinked one after another. Among his people, this was a sign of amusement, the way a human might laugh at a child's silly question. No species declines. The Council commands 40,000 warships. Your entire population could be moved to mining colonies within a single month. This is not a request. This is how things are. Marcus Webb leaned forward in his chair. His hands were steady, but Patricia could see the tension in his jaw. Perhaps we could discuss the terms, find some arrangement that works for both sides. There are no discussions, Kethforin replied. There are no arrangements. There is tribute and there is destruction. These are your only choices. 1 rotation, humans. I suggest you use the time wisely. The ambassador turned and walked out without another word. His guards followed, their weapons held ready as if they expected the humans to attack. The door closed behind them with a sound like a tomb sealing shut. For a long moment, no one spoke. Well, Patricia finally said, "That went about as badly as we expected." Marcus rubbed his eyes. He suddenly looked much older than his 50 years. 30% of our minerals. 10,000 people every year. They want to bleed us dry. They want to own us, Linda corrected. The minerals and the people are just the beginning. Every tribute species ends up the same way. Complete dependence on the Council. Complete obedience. They become slaves in everything but name. Patricia walked to the window and looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there, beyond the blue, the massive alien ship waited. 40,000 warships, the ambassador had said. Humanity had perhaps 200 vessels capable of fighting in space, and most of those were small patrol craft. The math was simple and brutal. "What do we know about species that resisted?" Marcus asked. Linda pulled out a tablet and scrolled through files. They had gathered every piece of information they could about the Council over the past several decades. Piecing together data from intercepted signals and long-range observations, the Vorn held out for 11 days. Her homeworld is now a mining colony. The survivors work in the deep tunnels. The Cathany lasted 16 days. They were scattered across labor camps throughout Council space. They no longer exist as a unified people. Anyone else? Dozens of others. All the same story. Resistance, followed by complete destruction of their civilization. Linda set down the tablet. The Council has been doing this for 12,000 years. They have it down to a science. Marcus stood and joined Patricia at the window. So we have no choice. We accept their terms, or we die. Patricia was quiet for a long time. She watched a bird fly past the window, free and unaware of the crisis unfolding below. She thought about her granddaughter, who was 7 years old and loved to draw pictures of spaceships. She thought about all the children on Earth, all the dreams and hopes and futures that hung in the balance. "There's always a choice," she said finally. "The question is whether we're brave enough to make it." "Brave or foolish," Marcus replied. "What are you thinking, Patricia?" She turned to face him. "I'm thinking that every species they've conquered accepted the same basic idea, that resistance was impossible. They looked at the numbers and saw no hope, so they gave up before the fight even started. But what if that's exactly what the Council wants? What if the real weapon isn't their fleet, but our own fear?" Linda stepped closer. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we call a meeting. Every leader, every general, every scientist on Earth. We have 24 hours to make the most important decision in human history." Patricia's eyes were hard now, the eyes of a warrior preparing for battle. "And I think we need to consider doing something no species has ever done before, which is—" Patricia smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "We tell them no, then we make them regret ever coming to our door." The room fell silent again. Outside, the shadow of the alien ship continued to crawl across the Earth, dark and cold and seemingly unstoppable. But somewhere in that darkness, a spark was beginning to catch fire. The hours after Cathforin's departure were the most intense in human history. Emergency meetings began across the planet. Presidents and prime ministers gathered in secure rooms. Generals spoke through encrypted channels. Scientists ran calculations that would determine the fate of billions. The clock was ticking, and everyone knew it, in the deepest bunker beneath the Pentagon. Patricia Hayes stood before a room full of the most powerful people on Earth. Military commanders from every nation sat together. Old enemies now united by a common threat. Scientists who had spent their lives studying the stars now faced the reality that the stars had come for them. Political leaders who had argued for decades found themselves agreeing for the first time. Dr. Samuel Grant was the first to speak. He was a thin man in his late 50s, with messy gray hair and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. He had dedicated his life to studying alien civilizations from afar, analyzing their signals, their movements, their patterns. Now, all that work had led to this moment. "I want to be clear about what we're facing," Samuel said, his voice calm, despite the fear in his eyes. "The Galactic Council has conquered every species that resisted them. Every single one. The Vorn had a military tradition going back thousands of years. They had weapons we would consider advanced, even today. They lasted 11 days. The Cathani were brilliant strategists who had unified their entire star system. 16 days. There are no success stories. There is no one who beat them." General Carlos Reyes slammed his hand on the table. He was a large man with a face like carved stone, decorated with medals from 3 different conflicts. "So you're telling us to give up? To hand over our people, our resources, our future?" "I'm telling you what the data shows," Samuel replied. "Their military advantage is absolute. Their fleet outnumbers ours by a factor of 200. Their technology is centuries ahead. In a straight fight, we lose. There is no question about that." "Then what do we do?" someone asked from the back of the room. Samuel adjusted his glasses. I said their advantage is absolute in conventional terms, but the Council has a weakness. They've never faced an enemy like us. Linda Morrison stepped forward and activated a holographic display that filled the center of the room. Blue light painted strange shapes in the air, complex diagrams that most people couldn't begin to understand. For 40 years, we've been working on something called Project Lighthouse, Linda explained. Officially, it was a deep space communication system, a way to send messages across vast distances instantly. But the technology behind it has other uses. The display changed, showing a device that looked like a metal ring surrounded by spinning generators. This is a gravity well generator. It creates localized distortions in space-time. Small ones, at first. We use them for research, for studying how gravity affects light and matter. Get to the point, Carlos said impatiently. Linda nodded. Scaled up, this technology can disable any ship within range. Faster than light engines work by bending space-time. Our device bends it back. Every vessel caught in its field would be dead in space. No engines, no weapons, nothing. Their entire fleet could be stopped without firing a single shot. The room erupted in noise. People shouted questions, demanded details, argued about possibilities. Patricia let them go on for a moment before raising her hand for silence. How many of these devices do we have? She asked. One working prototype, Linda admitted. But we understand the principles now. We have the factories and the materials. Given time, we could build hundreds. Time we don't have, Marcus Webb pointed out. He had been silent until now, listening and thinking. The ambassador gave us 24 hours. By this time tomorrow, they'll expect an answer. Patricia walked to the front of the room, standing before the holographic display. The blue light made her gray hair look almost silver. Then we need to buy time. We need to make them hesitate. How? Carlos asked. They've been doing this for 12,000 years. They've seen every trick, heard every excuse. Have they? Patricia asked. Think about what Samuel said. Every species they conquered accepted the same basic premise, that fighting was impossible. They looked at the numbers and they gave up before they started. The Council has never faced a species that simply refused to accept that premise. Samuel leaned forward, understanding beginning to show on his face. You want to call their bluff? I want to do more than that. I want to make them doubt themselves for the first time in 12,000 years. She turned to face the assembled leaders. These were men and women who had fought each other, hated each other, competed against each other for generations. Now they sat together, united by fear and desperate hope. Let me tell you about humanity, Patricia said. We've been killing each other since before we learned to write. We've developed weapons capable of ending all life on our planet, and we've used them. We've fought wars over land, over resources, over ideas, over things so petty they make no sense even to us. We are not a peaceful species. We never have been. She paused, letting the words sink in. But that same violence has driven us forward. Every war pushed us to develop new technologies. Every conflict forced us to adapt, to innovate, to survive. We went from horses to spaceships in less than 300 years. We developed nuclear power and artificial intelligence while still fighting among ourselves. We are a species that evolves through struggle. Marcus was watching her carefully. What are you proposing exactly? I'm proposing that we tell the Council the truth about who we are. Let them understand that they're not dealing with another peaceful civilization that will roll over at the first threat. Let them see what 10,000 years of constant warfare has created. Patricia's voice was hard now, filled with a fire that spread through the room. We tell them no. And then we let them wonder what else we might do. It's a gamble, Samuel said. If they call our bluff, if they attack immediately, then we fight. We use every weapon we have, conventional and experimental. We make them pay for every inch of space they take. We show them that conquering humanity will cost more than it's worth. Patricia looked around the room. Maybe we lose. Maybe we all die. But at least we die standing up. At least we die free. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Carlos Reyes stood up, his metals clinking softly on his chest. I've spent my whole life preparing for war, he said. I never thought I'd be fighting aliens. But if that's what needs to happen, then I'm ready. One by one, other leaders stood. Some were old enemies. Some had never spoken before this day. But now they rose together, united by a choice that would change everything. Patricia felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the hope of easy victory, but the hope that comes from knowing you're doing the right thing, no matter the cost. Then it's decided, she said. Tomorrow, we give them our answer. And the galaxy will never forget it. The sun was setting over Geneva when the alien shuttle descended from the massive ship above. Orange and red painted the sky, colors that seemed almost too beautiful for such a terrible day. Ambassador Kethvorin had returned exactly 24 hours after delivering his demands. He expected groveling acceptance, perhaps some begging for mercy. That was how it always went. That was how it had gone for 12,000 years. Patricia Hayes waited alone on the landing platform. She had sent the others away, insisting that this moment needed only one voice. She wore her military uniform, every medal she had ever earned displayed on her chest. Behind her, the flags of every nation on Earth flew in the evening wind. She had ordered them raised that morning. If humanity was going to fall, it would fall with its colors flying. The shuttle touched down with a hiss of cooling engines. Guards emerged first, tall beings with weapons that hummed with deadly energy. Then came Kethvorin himself, his scales catching the fading sunlight like polished armor. His four eyes scanned the platform, noting the absence of the usual crowd. "Where's your delegation?" he demanded. His translator gave his voice a cold, mechanical quality. "Where are the others?" Patricia stood perfectly still. You don't need a delegation for a simple message. And the message is simple. Kethvorin moved closer, his height towering over her. Most species found the Silvari intimidating. They were designed to be evolved on a world where only the strongest survived. He waited for her to shrink back, to show the fear that all lesser beings showed. Patricia did not move. Humanity's answer is no, she said. The ambassador's scales shifted through several colors. Among his people, this was a sign of confusion, something he rarely experienced. I do not understand. You refuse to pay tribute? We refuse all of it. The minerals, the people, the genetic access, all of it. Patricia's voice was steady and clear. Go back to your council and tell them that Earth is not for sale. Our people are not for sale. Our future is not for sale. Kethvorin studied her with all four eyes. He had been doing this work for a very long time. He had seen defiance before, but it was always the defiance of desperation. It's the last thrashing of a creature that knew it was already defeated. This was different. This human stood before him with the calm confidence of someone who had already made peace with death. You understand what this means? He said finally. This is not a negotiation. When I report your refusal, the council will send the fleet. Your world will burn. Your species will be scattered across mining colonies and labor camps. Everything you have built will be destroyed. Maybe, Patricia replied. But maybe not. There is no maybe. The council has destroyed every species that defied them. Your fate is already written. Patricia smiled then, a cold expression that held no warmth or humor. Is it? Let me tell you something about my species, Ambassador. Something you should know before you report back to your masters. She began to walk slowly around him, her hands clasped behind her back. The guards raised their weapons, but Kethvorin waved them down. He was curious now, intrigued despite himself. We've been fighting each other since before we learned to farm, Patricia said. Long before we had cities or writing, we were killing each other with rocks and sticks. When we developed bronze, we used it for swords. When we learned to split the atom, we immediately built bombs capable of destroying our entire planet. We have fought wars that lasted 100 years. We have committed acts of violence so terrible that we made new words just to describe them. She stopped in front of him again. Looking up into his four alien eyes, your council has existed for 12,000 years. In that time, you've conquered dozens of species. But have any of those species been like us? Have any of them spent their entire existence perfecting the art of war? You've been playing at conquest, Ambassador? We've been practicing survival. Cathorin's scales had gone still, frozen in a pattern of deep blue that Patricia had never seen before. You are bluffing. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Your fleet is nothing compared to what the Council commands. Our technology is different, Patricia corrected. We've had to develop weapons against ourselves, against enemies who think like us, who adapt like us, who refuse to give up like us. You've never faced that. Your enemies have always been weaker, always been slower, always been willing to surrender. She stepped closer, close enough to see her own reflection in his scales. We don't surrender. We never have. We have a saying on Earth. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. Your council has a lot of ships, but do they have our will to survive? Do they have 10,000 years of constant warfare running through their blood? Pretty words, Cathorin said, but there was something new in his voice. Uncertainty. They will not stop weapons fire. Maybe not. But here's what I want you to think about as you fly back to your masters. Patricia's voice dropped to almost a whisper. In 12,000 years, has the Council ever met a species that said no? Not couldn't fight back, but chose not to submit. What does it tell you that we're the first? What does it tell you about what we might be capable of? She straightened and stepped back, returning to her formal stance. Go home, Ambassador. Deliver your report. Tell them the humans refuse tribute. Tell them we're not afraid. And tell them this. She paused, letting the moment stretch. We're coming. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But someday the Council will look up and see human ships in their sky. And on that day, they'll wish they had treated us as equals instead of subjects. Cathorin stood frozen for a long moment. His guards shifted nervously, uncertain what to do. They had never seen their master hesitate before. Finally, the ambassador turned and walked back to his shuttle. At the doorway, he paused and looked back. You have made a terrible mistake, he said. The Council will crush you. Patricia didn't flinch. They'll try. And that's when they'll learn what humanity is really capable of. The shuttle rose into the darkening sky, climbing toward the massive ship that still hung above the earth like a threat made solid. Patricia watched until it disappeared from sight. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Marcus Webb and Linda Morrison approached, their faces pale but determined. It's done, Patricia said. Now we prepare for what comes next. And what comes next? Marcus asked. Patricia looked up at the stars, at all those distant points of light that had suddenly become battlefields. War, revolution, maybe extinction, or maybe something no one has ever seen before. She turned to face them, and despite everything, there was fire in her eyes. Either way, the galaxy is about to learn that humanity doesn't kneel. Not now, not ever. The Galactic Council Chamber was the most magnificent room in the known universe. It had been built 8,000 years ago, carved from a single piece of crystal that stretched half a mile in every direction. Light filtered through the walls, casting rainbow patterns across the floor, where representatives of 17 ancient species gathered to rule the galaxy for 3,000 years. This chamber had been a place of calm deliberation. The elder races discussed tribute quotas and resource allocation with the quiet confidence of beings who had never faced a real challenge. Disagreements were minor, solved through ancient protocols and gentle compromise. The system worked. It had always worked. But today, the chamber was chaos. Representatives shouted over each other in a dozen different languages. Translation devices sparked and stuttered, unable to keep up with the volume of noise. Aides ran between delegations, carrying messages that were already outdated by the time they arrived. The rainbow light seemed darker now, stained by the tension that filled the air. High Counselor Mirathex of the Dominion slammed her ceremonial staff against the crystal floor. The sound rang through the chamber like a bell, cutting through the noise. She was ancient even by council standards, her purple skin wrinkled with age, her 3 eyes clouded but still sharp. She had led the council for 200 years, and in all that time, she had never seen anything like this. Silence, she commanded. Her voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. We will have order in this chamber. The shouting faded to whispers, then to silence. All eyes turned to the center of the room, where Ambassador Kethvorin stood alone. He had delivered his report an hour ago. He had told them everything, every word the human had spoken, every gesture she had made. And then he had watched as the most powerful beings in the galaxy fell into panic. Counselor Drexvar of the Kelmathi was the first to speak. His species communicated partly through bioluminescent patterns on their skin. And right now, those patterns were flashing an angry red. This is absurd. One primitive species refuses tribute, and we descend into madness. Send the Third Fleet, destroy their world. This problem ends today. I agree, said another counselor, a massive being from a species that had evolved in heavy gravity. We have protocols for rebellion. We execute them. Why are we even discussing this? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber, but not everyone was nodding. Several counselors remained silent, their expressions troubled. Tell them again, Marathex said, her eyes fixed on Kethvarin. Tell them what the humans said. The ambassador straightened, gathering his thoughts. She spoke of their history. 10,000 years of continuous warfare among themselves. She said they developed weapons against enemies who think like them, adapt like them, refuse to surrender like them. She said they don't kneel. Posturing, Drexvar insisted. Empty words from a doomed species. Perhaps, Kethvorin replied, but I have delivered tribute demands to 37 species in my career. I have seen defiance before. This was different. She was not afraid. She was not desperate. She spoke as if she knew something I did not. Another counselor leaned forward. This one was small, almost delicate, with wings that folded behind his back like a cloak. Our observers have been watching this species for decades. Their development is ... unusual. Unusual how? Mirathex asked. They achieved faster than light travel in less than 1,000 years. Most species take 3,000 or 4,000. They developed nuclear weapons before they developed stable governments. They created artificial intelligence while still fighting world wars. They are reckless, violent, and unpredictable. All the more reason to destroy them quickly, Drexvar said. The winged counselor shook his head. You miss my point. Their violence has driven their advancement. Every war pushed them forward. Every conflict produced new technologies. They have been evolving at an unnatural rate, and they have been doing it while fighting among themselves. He paused, letting the implications sink in. What happens when they unite against a common enemy? The chamber fell silent. Mirathex rose from her throne and walked slowly to the center of the room, her staff clicking against the crystal floor. She stopped beside Kethvarin and looked up at the great dome above, where projections showed the location of every tribute world in the galaxy. In 12,000 years, she said quietly, no species has refused tribute. Not one. Some have resisted initially, but when they saw our strength, they accepted. This is the first time any species has heard our demands and simply said no, because they are fools. Drexvar growled, or because they know something we don't. Marathex turned to face the assembled counselors. Consider the possibility. Consider that these humans have developed technologies we haven't detected. Consider that their constant warfare has produced weapons we can't imagine. Consider that their refusal is not foolishness, but confidence. You want us to be afraid of a species that only achieved space travel 8 cycles ago? I want us to be careful. Marathex's voice hardened. I have ruled this council for 200 years. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have seen species we thought were harmless become threats we barely contained. Complacency is the death of power. She returned to her throne and sat heavily, suddenly looking every one of her thousands of years. We will send the fleet, she decided, but we will proceed with caution. Scout ships first. We will learn exactly what these humans have before we commit our full strength. If they are bluffing, we destroy them. If they are not, she paused. If they are not, we will know before we make a mistake we cannot undo. Drexvar's lights flashed in frustration. This is weakness. The tribute worlds will see us hesitate. They will wonder if they could refuse to. Let them wonder, Mirathex replied. Better that than lose a fleet to unknown weapons. The vote was close, closer than any vote in centuries. But in the end, caution won by a handful of voices. The council would investigate before it attacked. For the first time in millennia, they would proceed with care. As the counselors filed out of the chamber, Kethvorn remained behind. Mirathex called to him before he could leave. "You met this human," she said. "This Admiral Hayes. What was your impression?" The ambassador thought carefully before answering. "She was not what I expected. Most species, when faced with our demands, show fear. Even if they try to hide it, you can see it in their movements, their voices, the way they breathe. She showed none of that. You think she was genuinely unafraid?" "I think—" Kethvorn paused, searching for the right words. "I think she had already decided that death was acceptable, and that made her more dangerous than any weapon. You cannot threaten someone who does not fear your threats." Mirathex nodded slowly. "That is what concerns me. For 12,000 years, our power has rested on fear. What happens when we meet a species that refuses to be afraid?" She waved him away, and the ambassador left her alone in the great crystal chamber. The rainbow light played across empty seats, illuminating a room that had witnessed the rise and fall of 100 civilizations. But now, for the first time, the High Counselor of the Galactic Council sat in shadow, wondering if everything she had built might be about to crumble. Outside the chamber, word was already spreading. The humans had said no. The council had hesitated, and across 1,000 worlds, other species were starting to ask themselves a question that had seemed unthinkable just days before. What if we could say no to? 3 months had passed since humanity said no. In that short time, the galaxy had changed more than it had in the previous 1,000 years. Old certainties crumbled like ancient stone. New possibilities emerged from the ruins. And at the center of it all, a small blue planet continued to spin through space. Defiant and unbroken, the Council's scout ships had arrived at the edge of human space expecting easy reconnaissance. What they found was something entirely different. Without warning, without any detectable weapon fire, their engines had simply stopped working. Their ships hung dead in the void, helpless as human vessels approached. The crews had been terrified, expecting torture or execution. Instead, they were brought aboard human ships and treated with dignity. They were given food, medical care, and comfortable quarters. Then, after a week, they were returned to council space with a message. Patricia Hayes had recorded it herself. Standing on the bridge of Earth's first true battleship, the Defiance. The video was broadcast across the galaxy, played in every corner of council space. "We don't want war," she had said, her voice calm and clear. "We never wanted war. All we want is to be treated as equals. Meet us at the table as partners, and we can build something better than the tribute system. Continue to threaten us, and we will continue to defend ourselves. The choice is yours." The council had not responded officially, but the message had reached far beyond the council chambers. It had reached the tribute worlds, the labor colonies, the mining camps, where conquered species toiled in darkness. And it had ignited something that the elder races had never imagined possible. On the planet Vorn, where the survivors of an ancient warrior race worked in deep underground mines, a rebellion had begun. It started small, just a few workers refusing to report for their shifts. Then it spread. Within a month, the entire planet was in open revolt. The Vorn had reclaimed their world, their first taste of freedom in over a century. The Kethani, scattered across a dozen labor colonies, had organized a general strike. They simply stopped working. No matter what the overseers threatened, no matter what punishments were inflicted, they refused to return to their stations. The council's industrial output dropped by 15% in a single week. And perhaps most importantly, species began talking to each other. For thousands of years, tribute races had been kept separate, prevented from forming alliances that might threaten council control. Now that barrier was breaking down. Messages flew between worlds. Representatives met in secret. Plans were made. On Earth, humanity worked day and night. The single lighthouse prototype had become 10, then 50, then over 100. New ships rolled out of factories that had once built weapons for human wars. Scientists who had spent their lives competing with each other now collaborated freely, sharing discoveries that advanced technology by decades in mere months. Secretary General Marcus Webb addressed not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. His message was translated into every known language and broadcast on every frequency. To the Council, he said, "We have made our position clear. We will not be subjects. We will not pay tribute, but we remain open to genuine diplomacy. We do not wish to destroy your civilization. We wish to transform it." He paused, and when he continued, his voice carried a new weight. "To the other species of this galaxy, the ones who have suffered under tribute for generations, we say this: you don't have to accept this system. The Council is powerful, but they are not gods. They can be resisted. They can be defeated. Stand with us, and together we can build a galaxy where no species bows to another." The response exceeded anything humanity had hoped for. Within a year, 12 tribute species had declared independence from the Council. Some had weapons, some had only their will, but all of them had heard the same message and drawn the same conclusion. If humanity could say no, so could they. Patricia Hayes stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching through the view screen as ships from 30 different species gathered in orbit around Earth. It was the first meeting of what they were calling the Free Worlds Alliance, a coalition of the willing, united by a simple idea: freedom was worth fighting for. Linda Morrison joined her, holding a tablet with the latest updates. "The Council has requested diplomatic talks. Actual talks, not demands." Patricia nodded slowly, not taking her eyes off the gathered fleet. "How long did that take them?" 3 months since our first message. They held out longer than I expected. Pride is hard to swallow. Hey, Patricia finally turned from the view screen. "What are their terms?" "They want to discuss a new arrangement. Recognition of human sovereignty in exchange for, well, they haven't specified. But the fact that they're asking instead of demanding is significant. It's more than significant. It's revolutionary." Patricia allowed herself a small smile. For 12,000 years, they've told everyone else how things would be. Now they're asking to negotiate. That's not diplomacy. That's surrender. The door opened and Marcus Webb entered, looking tired but satisfied. He had aged years in the past 3 months, but there was a light in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "The Alliance representatives are ready," he said. "They're waiting for your address." Patricia straightened her uniform and checked her reflection in the dark surface of a nearby console. The face that looked back at her was older, harder, but also somehow more alive than it had been before all this began. "You know," she said quietly, "when that ambassador first arrived, I was terrified. I thought we were all going to die." "Might still." Marcus replied honestly. "Maybe, but we'll die standing up. We'll die free. And more importantly, we showed everyone else that dying free is possible." She walked toward the door, then paused. "That's what really changed the galaxy, you know? Not our weapons, not our technology, just the idea that someone could say no and survive. That single idea has done more damage to the Council than 1,000 warships ever could." She stepped onto the bridge of a ship surrounded by vessels from 30 worlds. Beings of every shape and size watched her on screens across the galaxy. Former slaves, former subjects, former tribute payers, all of them now standing together as equals. Patricia Hayes, Admiral of Earth, looked out at the assembly and felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. What she said now would shape the future of civilization itself. "Friends," she began, "allies, fellow beings of the galaxy, we are gathered here because we all believed in the same impossible thing. We believe that the strong should not rule the weak simply because they can. We believe that every species has the right to determine its own fate. We believe that saying no to tyranny is worth any price." She paused, letting her words echo through space. "The Council's afraid of us. Not because of our weapons. Not because of our numbers. They're afraid because we represent something they cannot destroy, an idea. The idea that tribute is not inevitable. The idea that submission is not required. The idea that a single word, spoken by those with the courage to mean it, can change everything." She straightened, standing as tall as any being in the room.
That word is no.
And today we say it together. No to tyranny. No to subjugation. No to a galaxy ruled by fear. Her voice rose to fill the bridge, the ship, the fleet, the galaxy itself. The Council built their empire on the assumption that everyone would eventually kneel. They were wrong. We don't kneel. Not now, not ever. And because of that, the galaxy will never be the same. The bridge erupted in cheers and calls and sounds that humans had never heard before. 30 species, united by a single human word, celebrated the birth of something new and far away in a crystal chamber on an ancient world. The rulers of a 12,000-year empire listened to that celebration and felt something they had never felt. Before fear, the kind that comes when you realize that everything you built can come crashing down because one small species on one small world refused to bow. Humanity had rattled the galaxy, and the galaxy would never forget it.